So what the hell happened to the DCEU, and why did it get transformed into the DCU? Well, theories abound, and there's a lot of things that are rather obvious, but when it comes to The Flash and knowing that there were alternate versions of it, there's things to look into. So here we are once again at Cosmic Book News, and here's Matt McCloin's take on it. Now, this is a lot of rumor and speculation, of course, but rumors can be true, they can be untrue. More times than not, they're somewhere in between, and I think this is largely the case here. But when it comes to rumors, you weigh it with what sounds credible and especially on what you already know. Everyone knows this, that anyone who paid attention to it, that The Flash got reshot quite a bit, and based on what I've followed, that there were three possibilities for The Flash. There was the Armada version, it's called, because he was in charge at the time, about leading into a more female DCEU with Supergirl replacing Superman and Batgirl replacing Batman, with Michael Keaton being around as an elderly mentor type Batman, if he was going to be Batman at all going forward after the Flash movie and Batgirl. Well, who knows? But that was the one plan. Well, then things shifted with Zaslav coming in and all of that. And for a brief moment, there was the temporary holders of Abdi and DeLuca, and their plan was to bring back Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck and reorganize the DCEU that way for at least the cast. And that seemed the deal. I mean, Henry Cavill shows up in the Black Adam film at the end, even though he was, a Herculean effort to get it done, and last minute shot, but nevertheless, that was the deal. And then in less than a month, everything changed. So the question was, why did that change and stuff like that? I assumed money, and I still assume it, that that's the main reason of why this happened. But here we break down things with the help of Mr. McCloin here. So he's saying DC insiders gave him the lowdown on the Flash movie and about what the original ending was. Well, I suspect this was one of the endings. The original ending was to involve, like I said, the Supergirl and then followed up by the Batgirl movie and all that, which they were saying got canceled because it was really bad. But also, it's a problem if you're going to abandon that direction. Then there's a lot of things within it with Michael Keaton's Batman there and all that stuff of definitely multiverse shenanigans with J.K. Simmons reprising Commissioner Gordon in that story when he wasn't Michael Keaton's Commissioner Gordon. He was Ben Affleck's Commissioner Gordon, but they're merging the worlds and that kind of thing. Well, they're abandoning all of that. Unless they were going to reshoot it with George Clooney. But no, they canceled it for the tax write-off and all of that. So looking at it and behind-the-scenes shots and saying, gee, it looks like CW level stuff. It looks bad. But ultimately, I think more to the point that it just doesn't fit the overall shared universe narrative anymore that they wanted to do. And that probably would have been true even with what I call the second plan, which was the DeLuca plan that Clint's going to get into here. That still the Batgirl movie might have been scrapped. But anyway, so that was the deal. Ben Affleck multiverse in addition to Man of Steel 2. So we go, the Flash movie bombed, and what happened? And so the flick went under major changes. Yes, it did. And how the ending of the Flash changed with George Clooney being Batman at the end. So Man of Steel 2, which was briefly announced and then taken back. So Man of Steel 2 was going to feature Henry Cavill as Superman with Sasha Calle as Supergirl against Brainiac in a more inspired and positive movie. With some rumors that Christopher McQuarrie could be lured back, even though he was very negative about his experience with Warner Brothers. He and Henry Cavill pitched a Man of Steel. He goes into that. Apparently Hamada turned it down, and McQuarrie said, all right, I'm done with this idea. Plus there was a Green Lantern movie idea he had as well. But perhaps they could have lured him back. Hey, it's new management, and we want you and Henry to do a Man of Steel. And maybe that would have happened. That would have been really cool. Because I really like his Mission Impossible films, and I like the current one, too. I recommend it. Anyway, but also with Supergirl being involved with Brainiac, because I always thought a Brainiac film would be really good for it. It's high time they did it with Henry Cavill. And Supergirl being a part of that is also significant in the sense that she would know Brainiac. She would remember she was, of age on Krypton as a teenager, but nevertheless, when Kandor was taken, and that's what she said. Oh, that's him. That's Brainiac, and all that sort of stuff. And so they team up together to deal with it. And I thought there's a way you could weave this into plot threads from Zack Snyder's Justice League, his version of it, about Darkseid and all of that. It could be this ominous coda to the film for a follow-up to that, and in the Man of Steel 2, where Superman wins and everything, but Brainiac explains the reason he goes to he went to Krypton because he knew it was a doomed planet, and he's just preserving these cultures in his little bottled cities, and that Metropolis, he was going to take that as the only thing left of humanity, because he says this world's doomed, and then says that because he's coming, and then Superman, realizing that yes, there is this threat of Darkseid, gets he has this victory, but at the same time he's like, oh crap, he's talking about that, and then that would be a setup for a Justice League film down the road, where they take on Darkseid. So I thought that would be a neat way of tying it together, where the bulk of the movie is Superman versus Brainiac with Supergirl involved and all that. And plus it sets up Sasha Calle's future as Supergirl beyond the Flash movie, and you could have a Supergirl film, as it should be in the means, but you got to have Superman involved in Supergirl's story. That's what her story is. Not so crazy about where they're going to go with the Tom King story. I think this one would have been a much better way to really solidify her as their Supergirl, and it's a shame that was lost. So they shot that down. So Mike DeLuca, this was the plan that apparently he was forging. He's given some background on him, that he's responsible for the Blade movies getting made and bringing in David Goyer. This is according to McCloy. I don't know how much involvement he had with that, but David Goyer came in, and of course he was responsible for the scripts for the Dark Knight trilogy and Man of Steel. So anyway, apparently, because here we go again with these cuts. So he says the cut for the Flash that Michael DeLuca oversaw is considered a masterpiece, and goes on to speculate that he believes that perhaps this is what James Gunn was talking about when he said it was the best superhero movie he'd ever seen. Stuff like that. Zaslav weighed in on that, but I mean, they're promoting the film, I understand, but when it's that bad. And all in all, in a lot of ways, I enjoyed aspects of it, but the problems there are the problems. Most notably, the biggest problem is Ezra Miller and his scandals and whatnot. And no amount of great script was going to change that. But again, it's just like Indiana Jones. I didn't expect it to do as bad as it did. So anyway, so it continues on about, Man of Steel 2, the Black Adam versus Superman would have happened. And James Gunn would have been involved. And he still would have been the overall Kevin Feige in charge of it. But this states that he was more on board with this direction, that he would manage it. And now this other thing about Batman Beyond keeps getting mentioned, and that there was going to be a Batman Beyond, which would make sense for a future for Michael Keaton to have that. Other people counter that no, they weren't going to do it, that the Batgirl movie was their approach to Batman Beyond, where he's a mentor to Batgirl, not to the Terry McGinnis Batman. And with Michael Keaton remaining, and that was the alternate ending, even in the DeLuca version. Apparently, Henry Cavill shows up. I believe Wonder Woman was supposed to be there, and Sasha Calle is Supergirl, and then Michael Keaton shows up, and and it's like, well, it's still a bit of a mess, but they were following. This was the continuing on the multiverse narratives for future films, but nevertheless, to get to a Batman Beyond out of that situation is odd. The Affleck was supposed to appear in a post-credit scene. Heard about this before. Apparently, that is true. That and we now see scenes that looks like that's what that was, of these behind-the-scenes shots of Ben Affleck, shooting this scene where he says, "Barry, you have to find us," and he's trapped or what have you. And then that's the deal. But it seems like to me that Michael Keaton's Batman would be lost, or at least shown to be in this other universe where it's a more futuristic world, which is what the Batman Beyond world was like, kind of, Blade Runner looking and cyberpunk type stuff. And he's developed this suit. And you tell that story, and there's the Michael Keaton Batman franchise, so where he's a mentor figure to the Batman Beyond character. But anyway, I guess that's not what they were doing, so maybe the Batgirl movie would be repurposed in that element. But what have you, something in some form or fashion was in the thinking. He says, Kevin Smith is absolutely right about this. Well, maybe not. I mean, Kevin Smith, especially after He-Man, not all that great in favor. But as far as hearing things about what the direction the studio is, yeah, maybe he did know. So Grant Morrison's involvement, it refers to that this is a scene from the Titans show, which was a cheaper version of looking at the multiverse, but it's kind of the same idea as what happens in The Flash. It's like, okay, you see a bunch of old TV shows and movies, and that's about it. But Grant Morrison appeared in it because he did this thing with Animal Man where he wrote the story where he actually appears in his own comic book to reveal that Animal Man's aware that he is a comic book character. And Grant Morrison always loved multiverse stuff. He never abandoned it, even when the company as a whole did after Crisis on Infinite Earths. But he was having none of that. So he just loved the idea. Also, Final Crisis comes up where there was that tease where Zack Snyder had the book on the kitchen table during Thanksgiving, and he put that out on Vero, and everyone got, oh, they're going to do Final Crisis. So the idea is a reworked deal where in Final Crisis, Batman died seemingly at the hands of Darkseid, where he hit him with his Omega beams. But the Omega beams don't necessarily always kill people. They can transport people elsewhere. And in that case, it transported Batman into the past, and which was some sort of contingency plan for Darkseid if it failed, that by the time Bruce Wayne traveled back to the future, it would have caused a cataclysmic devastation, but they managed to avert that and get him back anyway. But nevertheless, that was a weird time travel story that he was involved in. But here they'd rework it to where he's lost in the multiverse type thing. But still, the story goes that they were interested in him getting his Batman movie done. Under these circumstances, that would be rather odd. Would they even acknowledge that, or does he have a post-credit scene after his Batman versus Deathstroke movie where he realizes he's in the wrong universe or something? I don't know how you would patch that in there like that. But nevertheless, you get Ben Affleck's movie out of the deal. And so on and so forth. So it was a reworking of it, but they say that the way the ending was handled, that it was a better, and they say, well, it's at the end of the Flash movie, Barry does not realize that his friend is trapped somewhere in the multiverse, which, if you think about it, is rather horrific, very emotional, and sad at the same time, because Barry's the only one who can save him. So it might be that he doesn't make contact to Barry, or he's trying to, and maybe that's how they did the scene. But eventually he reaches Barry, and he has to go get him back from wherever he's trapped, and that sort of thing. So, there's nods and some amount of evidence that this was in the thinking. But whatever happened? Gee, what happened? Well, Warner Brothers just doesn't have any money. And the idea of going in this direction, it must have weighed how expensive that would be. And he said, it'd be a lot cheaper if we just scrapped everything and started over with new talent that's not as expensive. And also try to come up with scripts that don't call for a lot of money to be spent on for sets and special effects and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. So anyway, ultimately what's the mystery? The mystery is they're hurting for money and they couldn't do it. So here he does a sum up here. A Man of Steel starring Henry Cavill and Sasha Calle, Supergirl, possibly Christopher McQuarrie directing. Dwayne Johnson would stay on as Black Adam. You get your Black Adam versus Superman movie, Michael Keaton, Batman Beyond, Ben Affleck movie, stuck in the multiverse. So that's the interesting thing. I mean, is it still his script, but would they just tack on the multiverse stuff, possibly in a end credit scene or something like that? Zack Snyder involved back directing a DC movie. My guess would have to be the Justice League movie. And like I said, there's a way to weave that into the Man of Steel 2 story. The Flash 2, probably more of him trying to fix the multiverse. The problem with the multiverse stuff is that that's all the Flash does. It's kind of, that you keep putting him in that position. There again, I suppose they could follow it up with the Reverse Flash being revealed, because another big problem for the Flash movie, and I don't know if the original one did this, is like, who killed his mom? They don't do it. They tell you his father's innocent, but by that movie, he's like, was he? It's a problem. So now more DCEU projects with James Gunn in charge, and that was the plan. More DCEU projects, of course, would depend on whether or not this was successful. Just by my biased reckoning, because I wanted the cast to remain, I would thought this would be a better direction. But if they don't have the money, they don't have the money. And here you go. But instead, Warner Brothers Discovery is completely broke. Well, that's the deal. I don't like this decision, but I can respect it based on the hard reality of that situation. And you say, hey, you can blame David Zaslav demanding cheaper talent and reboot, cancel everything, and butcher the Flash. Well, yeah, but it sounds more like that's a situation he can't get out of, that he's pretty much forced there. And so James Gunn, so they send James Gunn out there, and he announced he's developing the DCU, and James Gunn gets all the flack over that, and perhaps they didn't think it would be that bad, but, it's quite the drag on him. And then this announcement undercut the remaining DCEU movies, so they can't even perform as good as they might have had people not known that these are all dead-end movies. With The Flash, they really chased it and bolstered it, but they were stuck with those Ezra Miller scandals. So I don't know what they could have done. But they shouldn't have. I mean, the announcement and then that nastiness with Henry Cavill, that just, man. Well, I think that was a more serious wound than they anticipated. Warner Brothers Discovery being sold, yeah, I've long thought that. And I thought the idea of DC was to polish it up and to brighten it up and make it look inviting in the hopes they could sell that to somebody. But they've done, damage to it. You can argue they were kind of stuck where they were, and that's been this DC story for a while. But so how do you polish it now? That Superman Legacy movie is going to have to be amazing. And it can't just be good. It's got to be great. So anyway, Gunn's DC will be at Universal along with HBO, DC Comics, etc. So, but Universal, what are they going to pay for it? He's like, well, it's not, I can see where it could be great, but it's not right now. So, does that, take care of the debt and problems that you have? Zaslav back in charge of Discovery. Certainly, I think that is the conclusion there, because even though Discovery is now part of the Max lineup, Discovery as an entity still remains separate. So that's the deal. polishes up Warner Brothers and tries to make a personal profit off of it in the selling and stuff, and he returns to be the God King of Discovery. And but it just seems like a likely outcome for it. So, and then McCloy goes on about how he's been hearing rumors like this for quite a while. And he says he's friends with people who know Michael Uzlan and all that. And that he had been hearing rumors about, for a while there, Abrams was involved in Reeves. And Reeves was more successful than Reeves because he's got the Batman. But Abrams was just once again following the woke narratives of, I'll do a black Superman. Now you can't cancel me and all that sort of stuff. Well, they got canceled anyway. And Abrams is on the outs. His golden days are over, especially after that humiliation over the Star Trek 4 announcement. And then not long after, the cast said, news to me. And I thought, wow, that's a big sign that the bad robot power has waned. And I think it's pretty much evaporated at this point. So that's the deal with him. But he was there. There were projects. They were working on that. So that's the thing about, see, the rumors were wrong. They weren't wrong. They didn't work out. There's plans afoot. There's all kinds of stuff. There could be concept art for scenes that never get shot. And then there's cuts you'll never see. The Flash is apparently 4 hours long. It's like Zack Snyder's Justice League. So I don't know, release the Muschietti cut or the DeLuca cut. But then appears to be there's 3 different endings. There's the woke ending for the all-female, future DC. And then there's this DeLuca cut, apparently, with Henry Cavill in it. And then there's the one you got with George Clooney and stuff. And ultimately announced that it's a dead-end movie. It doesn't matter if you watch it or not. Oh, but he changed the universe, but there's nothing about the new universe in it. So it doesn't really do the job it was intended to do, because it was too late, and they ran out of money. That's why the special effects look so bad. They couldn't fix those. They ran out of money. So, yeah, money is the main factor here. Otherwise, yeah, you would continue with Henry Cavill as Superman. And I think they could have continued with Sasha Calle as his Supergirl, and that would have been a nice film. And you could have spun her out into her own and all that sort of stuff. So, it's just sad. But a lot of this is, for blame, goes to the previous regimes who squandered things, panicked over the foolishness, and kept meddling and meddling and meddling. And everybody's meddling to this day because they're scared. And they end up becoming self-fulfilling prophecies of failure when it didn't have to be that way. So now they're in this position where whatever James Gunn does with his Superman, and poor David Cornsweet is going to take a lot of grief because he's not Henry Cavill, which is unfair to him. But it can't, like I said, it can't just be a good film. Certainly can't just be an okay film. It's got to be a masterpiece because of the position they're in. And that's highly unlikely. But look, even the Flash film, a good bit of it, I don't really mind that much. In some parts I actually liked. But that's not good enough. It had already a Mount Everest situation with Ezra hill to climb, but in the position they're in, I don't know. Wish them well, but it's just all very sad, and it just makes it even worse knowing details like this. But if they didn't have the money, they didn't have the money, so they couldn't do this. And that's unfortunate. And of course, again, the blame is previous foolish managers of that studio. So anyway, there you go. Will we ever see the Muschietti cut or the DeLuca cut? Maybe on Netflix alongside the Air cut? I don't know. That would be cool just to see, Hell, even the Batgirl movie, just out of curiosity, But, well, I don't know. But anyway, either way, sounds like there was a better version. Could have happened, but didn't have the money for it.